How are you, comrades? It's good to see you. Today, we are going to visit the Sentry and Open Secrets, analyzing the three documents that they produced in the past year. One was produced this year, I think the other one last year or last of last year. It's called, the first one was Shadows and Shell Games. Then there's another one called France, Fakes and Facades. Other one, which is the latest one, is $1.6 billion paid to mystery shareholders by Zimbabwean Sovereign Wealth Fund. Well, basically, these whole reports are looking into Tagwirei's handling of his looting mechanism machine. It is analyzing how Tagwirei used a complex web of France, fakes, facades, and companies sprawling from Zimbabwe, South Africa, Mauritius, Switzerland, United Kingdom, Cayman Islands, in order to siphon resources from Zimbabwe, evade taxes, and find loopholes in global policy in order for him to embezzle funds and steal funds from Zimbabweans. The last report pays particular attention to a $1.6 billion that was paid by the Mutapa investment funds to Kutakwashe Tagwirei for a 35% stake in a company called Ziwa Resources, which owns the big mining firm Kuvimba Mining House. I would like to argue that this 1.6 billion paid to Kutakwashe Tagwirei for the 35% stake is an excessive and extreme over-evaluation of an asset which is worth far less than 1.6 billion. Buying this 35% at 1.6 billion translates to a valuation of 4.8 billion of Govimba Mining House. Under my own calculation, I believe that company is worth under $1 billion. My conclusion is that what we're seeing here is grand scale looting where Tagwirei uses his connections in government in order to force the government to buy a very cheap asset at highly, did I say highly inflated prices. In my own calculations, I would calculate that the valuation of that 35% is somewhere between $300 and $400 million, which is what John Mangoja, who is the CEO of Mutapa Investment Fund, should have paid for the 35% of Ziwa Resources. However, instead of paying 300 or 400 million, Mangoja thought it is best to pay 1.6 billion for a 35% stake. And I think that is robbing the Zimbabweans, and it is imprudent on the part of John Mangoja, and it is a terrible investment strategy. The Mutapa Investment Fund is not supposed to enrich Tagwirei or anyone in government. However, it is a fund to invest monies that belong to the Zimbabweans for profit-making purposes. It's supposed to buy resources that are affordable. I do not know if the former Reserve Bank governor ever read a book called The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham, or has he ever followed any of Warren Buffett's investment advice? You do not buy a company at 4 times its market price, especially if that company does not even have future earning potentials. At least if this Ziwa Resources was in artificial intelligence, we would think that there is some projected future incomes that will surpass, this current evaluation. But we're dealing with mining houses, which I have analyzed. There's about 7 major mines that Kuvimba Mining House owns, and most of them are not even making profit. Most of these mines were acquired by the government through Zimbabwe. What is it called? The Zimbabwe Mining Development Corporation took over these mines from the previous white owners after the independence of 1980. And most of these mines, including Evington Gold Mine, Zim Alloys, and the Great Dykes Investments, these mines have been mismanaged, financially mismanaged, and even operationally mismanaged, such that they were not making money. Even when the ZMDC took over, they also failed to run these companies. So the mining industry is not a cash cow. Sometimes mines make losses. So when John Mankucha was buying these assets, this 35% stake, and evaluate and paying 1.6 billion, I am wondering, what future prospects did he think these assets have to warrant a 1.6 billion dollar evaluation, when in my own view it is somewhere around 300 to 400 million? Based on what? This view that I'm telling you is based on the amount of money that Tagwirei paid to get the 35%, or even to get even the to acquire all of those resources. In fact, at this point, we will need to go backwards to understand the formation of this company, which is called Kuvimba Mining House. That is when we'll begin to uncover the web of lies, the web of fronts, fakes, and facades that Kutakwashe Tagwirei and the people that were fronting for him, and the people is paying particular attention to this detail, and the people that Kutakwashe Tagwirei was fronting for, people that are in the Zimbabwean government. According to the Sentry and Open Secrets, some of the names that are mentioned there are Gova Matenga, the permanent secretary of in the Ministry of Finance, the former Reserve Bank governor, uh, John Mangucha, and also His Excellency, the President, Emerson Mnangagwa, and other actors within the Zimbabwean government, including Sibusiso B. Moyo. These are the names that are mentioned in these reports that we studied, Shadows and Shell Games, France Facts and Facades, by the Sentry. So let us go back in order for us to understand how this looting game is played. We need to go back to see where Kutakwashe Tagwirei started and how we ended up having a company called Kuvimba Mining House, owned by Ziwa Resources, with 65% of Ziwa Resources owned by the government and 35% owned by Kutakwashe Tagwirei controlled Fimbi Resources, and how and why the government is paying 1.6 billion for the 35% stake, so that now Ziwa Resources is owned by the government of Zimbabwe, 100% wholly owned by the government of Zimbabwe. And we believe that 1.6 billion is overpaying. Now, this is where it all begins, because remember I told you that most of these companies that were taken over by government after the Smith regime began to fail operationally, and also they were financially mismanaged, and other privately owned companies also faced some political hurdles in Zimbabwe. In the 90s and 2000 and up to now, the government policy is unsustainable for foreign investors unless if that foreign investor has got strong ties with the Zimbabwean government to get some tax breaks or some kind of incentives. It is difficult to take out money out of Zimbabwe for foreign investors. It is also difficult to operate because of high maintenance costs due to labor issues, that is the inability to access qualified labor, inability to even access 24-hour electricity. Zimbabwe is always having electrical cuts. So because of that, there have been operational impediments in some of even the privately owned, foreign owned mines in Zimbabwe, sprawling from gold, platinum, nickel, and all the other minerals. And therefore, because of these distressed assets, the government has taken over some of them, but then the others were opting to sell. And Kutakwashe Tagwirei was during that time positioning himself to take over such mining assets. Of particular importance to this discussion is how he took over Bindura Nickel Corporation and Frederick Rebecca Gold Mine, um, which were formerly owned by Asa Resources, a UK-based company. So we are going to go back and see how this UK-owned company, Asa Resources, how it sold its shares to Shanduka's Tagwirei. Now, I say that they sold to Shanduka, but that's not what they say, because at the time of the sale, Kutakwashe Tagwirei was already a politically exposed person with negative press reviews, and if any financial institution, a banking institution, or mining house were to be engaged with him, they will have to do due diligence, and in that due diligence, they will discover that Kutakwashe Tagwirei is politically exposed and is a risky person to do business with. And because of that, his name had been tainted and dirty. So Kutakwashe needed to find a way in which he could access these foreign owned resources without the foreigners knowing that it is him, and also that the law enforcement agencies knowing that it is him who is buying, and also without them knowing the source of the funds, because knowing the source of the funds would elicit further questions on where did Tagwirei get the money to buy these these uh, these assets. So, in his wisdom, Kutakwashe Tagwirei employed a scheme, a network, a web of companies which were going to analyze and expose uh, through studying and understanding what the Sentry and Open Secrets revealed through their articles, Shadows and Shell Games, France Fakes and Facades, and also 1.6 billion paid to mystery shareholders by Zimbabwean Sovereign Wealth Fund. So this is how it began. What Kutakwashe Tagwirei did is that he had money in Shanduka. Shanduka tried to buy the resources, try to buy the Frederick Rebecca mine and Bindura mine from other resources, but he was declined because, as I told you, that is a politically exposed person. He also had tried to ask money from a traffic gura to purchase traffic wheeler, also declined here. So the next thing that he needed to do in order to consolidate his mines, because he was already buying some local mines from local people, because he was not dealing with the international community. But now that he's dealing with foreign investors, he had to hide himself. He had to hide. So the way that he hid is this: he formed a company in Mauritius, a company called Sotic International. It is this vehicle, Sotic International, that he was going to use to buy the assets of Asa Resources in Zimbabwe. Now, you will say, wouldn't Asa Resources know that Tagwirei is the owner of Sotic International? No, they wouldn't know, because in this arrangement, this Sotic company was owned by a trust called the Lighthouse Trust. That Lighthouse Trust is owned was owned by 4 white South Africans by the name of Joseph Bear, Christopher Faure, Christian Weber, and Ronel Sinclair. So when Asa Resources says Sotek is buying, through Lighthouse. Lighthouse is owned by some fellow whites: Joseph Bay, Christopher Fiore, Christian Weber, Ronel Sinclair. Stamp of approval. It's just from white to white. Nothing to no need to investigate further. That was Tagwirei's genius, using white people to buy from white people and taking himself out of it. But nonetheless, there is overwhelming evidence that he was in proper communication with all of these people, and they knew that he was the benefactor of Sonic International. Though the Lighthouse Trust was owned by these 4 white South Africans, it was of the understanding, clear understanding between all parties involved, that these 4 white South Africans are not the owners. They're just fronts, or rather agents for the true owner, which is Tagwirei. And Tagwirei himself being also a front for other people, other politicians in the Zimbabwean government. At the center of this whole scheme is a shadowy company based in Mauritius called Capital Horizon Limited, and its boss, Shan Kandomal, is the one who seems to be facilitating this whole structure. This Capital Horizon Limited, a management and consultancy company in Mauritius, helped Tagwirei to register Sotic International and work on this Lighthouse Trust. And he was working also with these South Africans. And Tagwirei apparently didn't have a bank account in in uh, in uh, in Mauritius, and this guy Shan Kundamal was friends with the CEO of Afri-Asia Bank. It is alleged through these reports that he used his friendship with the CEO of Afri-Asia Bank to open Tagwirei a bank account there. Because remember, as a politically exposed person and advisor to the president of Zimbabwe, who's under US sanctions, Afri-Asia Bank would normally would not open a bank account for Tagwirei, but because Shan Kundaman had knew people who knew people, very big people, so a bank account was opened for Tagwirei. Why was a bank account opened for Tagwirei? It's going to be very important in this web for that bank account for Tagwirei to be opened in Malaysia, as we learn further how this deal was done. So what happens here is that Sonic International, this fake company, is involved in commodities trading. So the commodity trading is just a cover up. It's just a front. It's like like those shops that sell drugs, but they'll be selling television on the radios. The business is not the TVs and radios. The business is the drugs. So they also had the business of commodity trading. But that wasn't the main thing. The main thing was Tagwirei using this so-called trading company called Sotic International to funnel funds from Zimbabwe to it. How did he do that? He used his companies in Zimbabwe. One of them is Landela Resources, other one is called the Remosa. So that the Remosas, when he needed money to purchase these assets, he used Landela and Remosa to buy commodities from Sotic International. But here's the thing: there's actually an invoice, but there's no proof of delivery, meaning that it's most likely that the invoice is forged. How much was paid? I think I don't have the actual figure here. Like, for example, they could, oh yeah, at one point, Remosa gave an invoice of 3.5 million to Sotic International, meaning that they paid 3.5 million to Sotic International for some goods to come into Zimbabwe, but those goods never came. So through this process, it was just a way of getting money out of Zimbabwe into Sotic International in Mauritius. So this is Tagwirei's money. Tagwirei and the people in the government, they used Remosa and Landela's fake invoices, buying fake things that never get delivered, when it's actually just a way of transferring money from Zimbabwe to Sotic International. So when Swatic International gets this money, they will be able to purchase Freda Rebecca Gold Mine and Bindura Nickel Corporation for somewhere around 20 million pounds, which is close to 30 million US dollars. So they were able, therefore, to transfer that money to the Royal Bank of Scotland uh, to other resources. So there's also complications in that way, in that process of sending the money to via the Bank of Scotland to other resources, compliance questions there. That is where the acrobatics of Shan Kundamal come into light, and Tagwirei's, political shenanigans come into play. They are able to use this structure of Sonic International being owned by the Lighthouse Trust used by 4 white South Africans to evade surveillance. So that when money is going to Scotland, it will look like it is money that is coming from 4 white South Africans. Now, that money was still not enough, because there was still some more that had to come to purchase. So it appears they still needed some more money. So another vehicle that Tagwirei used in order to cover up his name was what is called the Almas Global Opportunity Fund, segregated SPF. Okay, it's called the Segregated Portfolio Fund, which was offered by a company called Almas Capital. Now, I need to explain how this vehicle works. Remember, Tagwirei needs to hide his name. So, for him to send 8.24 million to Sotic International, he uses this vehicle. Now, Almas Capital is a company that is registered in the Cayman Islands. So you know that they have got that is a jurisdiction that allows for secrecy. So what this segregated portfolio fund is that it is actually a fund of funds. What happens is that Almas Capital has got many funds. So these funds are segregated. They're different. They're separated. So these separated or segregated portfolio funds, you could have your own segregated portfolio fund. So Tagwirei had his own segregated fund within Almas Global Opportunity Fund. That is what he used to deposit money to, so that when Almas Global Opportunity Fund sends money to Sotic, it's not recorded as coming from Tagwirei. It is recorded as coming from Almas Global Opportunity Fund. Because of key importance here is the source of fund, the origin of funds, and also the benefactor of the profits. That's what the regulators are looking for. And that Tagwirei was paying particular attention to avoid his name coming up as the originator of funds, because they will seek proof of income and source of funds. And also he was trying to hide from being the final benefactor, because if he's a final benefactor, then he will be known. He's a political exposed person. Not only him, but also the people in government that is working on behalf do not want to be known that they are the final benefactor. So they set up this lighthouse trust that is ostensibly owned by these 4 white South Africans. So since they needed some more money and also a way to rope in Tagwirei in the future, it was envisioned that in the future, once this deal is done and everything is okay, because it was the bridge was actually to get ASA resources to hand over their assets to Sotic International, and then after that they can sort each other out later, and they will bring Tagwirei in. So in order to bring Tagwirei in, they need to devise a platform in which there could be legal grounds for Tagwirei to come in. So how Sean Kondamal, who is the CEO of Capital Horizons Limited, they can use this structure by issuing something called a convertible debentures. Basically, what that is that it is a loan to Sotic International, and that loan can be converted into share capital. Meaning that if Almas Global Opportunity Fund were to receive these convertible debentures from Sotic International, they give this loan to Sotic International as a loan. They give this money as a loan. Sotic must pay it back. But obviously, here, Sotic will never pay back. Almas is supposed to exercise their right to turn that loan into shares, into equity at Sotic International. Remember that SPF is actually owned by Tagwirei. But the only person who knows it's owned by Tagwirei is Almas Capital. As far as Sotic International is concerned, they are selling the convertible debentures to Almas Capital and not Tagwirei. So in this way, Tagwirei does not come up as that this process begins. So even when the process ends, Tagwirei now can go claim his these debentures through Almas Global Opportunity. He can come up and say, okay, I'm the owner now. So Almas Global Opportunity can transfer the ownership of that to Tagwirei. So it was agreed that 8.24 million was going to constitute 65% of Sotic International, and with the Lighthouse Trust owning the remainder, which is 35%. That is after Almas Global has exercised the right to change the ownership. Has exercised the right to turn the debentures into a share equity. So before that, Lighthouse owns 100% of Sotic International, and the 8.24 million paid from Almas Global Opportunity Fund is just a loan as far as Sotic International and Lighthouse is concerned. So this is through the advice of Sean Kondamal, the CEO of Capital Horizons Limited. So what happens is that Tagwirei had to send money to Almas Capital. So the money that he sent, he used Afro-Asia Bank. That's when the bank comes into play now. He needed to use that bank, Afro-Asia Bank, to send money to Almas Capital in the Cayman Islands. Okay. So to Mauritius then. So what happened that he needed to transfer money from Afro-Asia Bank in Mauritius all the way to Almas Capital in the Cayman Islands. And the Cayman Islands takes the money back, routes the money back to Mauritius into Sotic International. So that Sotic International, which is supposedly owned by these four white guys, sends that money via a Zimbabwean entity that Tagwirei had set up, which is Landela Resources. So Landela Resources is a Zimbabwean company owned by a Mauritian company, Sotic International. So it is this Landela that therefore then buys the Asa Resources mines, which is Frederick Rebecca Gold Mine and the Pindura Nickel Corporation for almost like $30 million. So there is a lot of going back and forth concerning the legibility of the deal and if Tagwirei is involved or not. So Capital Horizon Limited and this Christopher Faure and Joseph Bear are back and forth with the guys from from Asa Resources in London, and also from the law firms and the financial consultancy in the United Kingdom. At the end of the day, it passes that, okay, Tagwirei is not involved. But we all know that Tagwirei is involved. But officially, on the papers, Tagwirei is not involved. So the sale is done. After the sale is done and the assets are moved from Asa Resources and they're now owned by Landela as a Tagwirei controlled company in Zimbabwe that is able to buy other uh, mines in Zimbabwe and consolidates them under this Landela brand. Actually, it is okay. So he consolidates them under Landela, and Landela is owned by Sotic International. Sotic International is owned by Lighthouse Trust. Lighthouse Trust owned by four white guys. There's no Zimbabwean involved in this thing on paper. So that is the structure that Tagwirei used in order for him to purchase British assets or British owned assets in Zimbabwe, and perhaps even other assets as well. I mean, from other people in in Zimbabwe. Straight after this, Tagwirei himself is under US investigation, and Tagwirei himself is put under US sanctions. Once he is put under US sanctions, now Sotic International is put under the spotlight. Everybody is scared. Even the white guys get scared. Even Capital Horizons get scared. Capital Horizons and Joseph, Christopher, Christian, Ronel, they all decide to close shop and have nothing to do with Tagwirei, have nothing to do with Sotic International. Remember that they were not even owners anyway. They were fronts. I do not know how much they were paid for being a front, but nonetheless, they disassociated themselves with Sotic International and Lighthouse Trust, and also Capital Horizon. Mauritius did disassociate itself with Sotic International after the sanctions, and Sotic International also left Mauritius jurisdiction and went to went to the UAE. So wasala kushaya umoya. Four white guys gone, Capital Horizon gone, Sotic International gone. Tagwirei was never there. Let alone Kuvamatanga and the Reformer Reserve Bank governor or Item Nangagwa. None of them are even in the story. The mentioning of them, they're mentioned as whispers. So whispers about their name, but everything is gone like this after the sanctions. So Sotic International is now in the UAE. So Tagwirei figures out a way of how can he secure his assets. Remember, Sotic International is owning a lot of these mines in Zimbabwe and they are under sanctions. So what he does is that Tagwirei comes up with a new structure. In this new structure, Sotic International transfers all the assets that it owns to a new Zimbabwean company. And he doesn't use Landela this time. He uses a new Zimbabwean company called Ziwa Resources. So in this Ziwa Resources, remember that before we even went to Ziwa Resources, when it was Sotic International, 35% was owned by the Lighthouse Trust. Lighthouse Trust owned by the four white guys. 65% was now owned by the Almas Global Opportunity Fund because they eventually exercised their right to turn the loan into equity. So at the time of winding down Sotic International, Almas Global Opportunity Fund was owning 65% shares, 35% by the Lighthouse Trust. So Tagwirei moves assets from Sotic International, moves all of those assets to a company in Zimbabwe. This company in Zimbabwe, he calls it Ziwa Resources. So the ownership structure is still the same, 35% and 65%. But then the change there is that the 35% is no longer owned by the Lighthouse Trust. I remember I told you that those four white guys left after the US sanctions. They disassociated themselves with Tagwirei. So after they disassociated themselves, that 35% belonging to Lighthouse Trust now belong to another new company in Zimbabwe called the Simbi Resources. to understand. So Ziwa Resources is a reincarnation of Sotic International. And Fimpi Resources is a reincarnation of Lighthouse Trust. The only difference is that the Lighthouse Trust was owned by 4 white guys or had benefactors who were 4 white guys. Now, Fimpi Resources has got 2 directors, which is Kutakwasha Tagwirei and his wife. And has got also 2 beneficiaries. And one of them is Kutakwasha Tagwirei Trust, and the other one is a trust called the Eagles Trust. And we do not know who is the benefactor of the Eagles Trust. We know that the Kutakwasha Tagwirei Trust, the beneficiary is his family, but the Eagles Trust, there is a question: is it somebody in government? Is somebody, some other, who else? So this person is not known. In the Zimbabwean records, there is records of Kutakwasha Tagwirei Trust and the beneficiaries. There's also records of Eagles Trust, but it's not written who actually is gonna be the benefactor of Eagles Trust. So when sales are made, like this $1.6 billion was paying for the 35% that is owned by Fimpi Resources. So this 1.6 billion is going to be shared between Kutakwasha Tagwirei Trust and Eagles Trust. Now we do not know the percentages of ownership between Kutakwasha Trust and Eagles Trust. Maybe Kutakwasha owns 20% and the Eagles Trust owns 80%. But whatever case, between the two of them, they both are going to receive 1.6 billion for the sale of the 35% of their stake in Ziwa Resources. Now, here is a question that you should be asking if you're listening attentively. So, we said government is buying 35% of VMP Resources, and we said government owns 65%. Was it not Almas Global Opportunity Fund that was owning the 65% at Sotic? You are right. Almas Global Opportunity Fund was owning 65% of Sotic International. Even after the transfer to Ziwa Resources, it was still Almas Global Opportunity Fund because that money came from Almas Global Opportunity Fund, not from the Zimbabwean government. But surprise, surprise, Zugu Zugu, it's no longer Almas Global Opportunity Fund owning that stake. It's now government of Zimbabwe. It is not clear if the government of Zimbabwe bought those shares from Almas Global Opportunity Fund. It is most likely that Tagwirei nominated the Zimbabwean government to be the benefactor of the Almas Global Opportunity Fund, SPF. I doubt if the Zimbabwean government paid anything for Almas for that 65%. What happens that Tagwirei just tells Almas Capital that, you remember, that's my money, right? Yeah, that man, that 65%, that is mine. I'm nominating the Zimbabwe government to be the owner. So that's how the Zimbabwean government became 65% owner of Ziwa Resources. Now, if you take a look at all the monies that were spent to buy the mines that constitute Ziwa Resources, that is where now I have got a problem of this 1.6 billion. Because if I evaluate them one by one, which is very difficult anyway, because there isn't much information on these individual companies, but you could just read around them and you can make a guesstimate of the price range, and you discover that most of these mines, they are worth 30-40 million. So you see, like the Freda Rebecca gold mine and Pindura nickel mine, Tagwirei paid close to $30 million. Actually the most expensive of them all in that portfolio of Kovimba gold mine is this one here. What's the name of it? It's the Great Dyke Investments, whose valuation is somewhere around 680 million. But remember that also this Kovimba Mining doesn't own 100% of it. Kutakwasha Tagwirei bought through Sotic International, he bought 50% of Great Dykes investments. So if it is worth 680 million, so Kutakwa share bought 50%, which is 340 million on current evaluation. If we're going to be generous and say Zimbabwe Alloys, I will give it Zimbabwe Alloys, Everton Gold, Jena Mines, and others, give it 150 to 200 million. If you're going to be generous, you're going to give the total to 500 million, with the bulk of it being Great Dykes investments at 300 and 340, and the other 160 being generous to the other non-performing, should I say again, non-performing mines. Perhaps it's only the gold mines that are doing well. Even the price of lithium has dropped. So not all lithium miners are making money. Just because you have got a mine doesn't mean you're minting money. Mines can make losses, operational losses that have got to do with the price of the mineral in question, management issues, investment issues. And most of these mines, as I told you earlier on, that they are mismanaged. They're not well run. Because they are mismanaged, they are distressed mines. Because of that, their valuations must be very, very low. So I'll be very generous to give 160 million to the rest of the assets that is owned by Kobimba Mining House. It appears to me that this collection of these assets is not really to revitalize the mining industry. It appears it is a part of a process of consolidating mining assets for the purposes of later selling to the government at an inflated price, of which the profit center here is not the actual mining activity. The profit center is selling underperforming mines for an extremely high price to a gullible buyer, which is Mutapa Investment Fund. And in that Mutapa Investment Fund, we find that it is run by the former Reserve Bank Governor of Zimbabwe, Mr. John Mangoja, who is many times mentioned by the Sentry and Open Secrets as being involved in this whole scheme involving Lighthouse Trust and Sotic International. And he's known by Joseph and Christopher and Ronel and Christian Weber. They, at some point, they suggest that the Lighthouse Trust must have John Mangoja as the guarantor. But apparently that plan didn't go through, but it opens up the door to an understanding that John Mangoja was involved in this whole setup. But when asked by the reporters, he declined, he denied, he said no wrongdoing on his part, and he knows nothing about this. But internal emails and other evidence point to an involvement of John Mangoja. And at the same time, now John Mangoja is now the CEO of Mutapa Investments Fund. Take a look at this conflict of interest. If he is one of the owners of Eagles Trust or Fimpi Resources or being involved in this Tagwirei thing, and then he also becomes the CEO of Mutapa Investments Fund, which is the buyer of what he himself is selling. Do you understand now the conflict of interest there? Because John Mangoja, allegedly, by looking at the email by Ronel Sinclair to Kutakwashe Tagwirei, when Ronel Sinclair was suggesting to Tagwirei that we must make John Mangoja the protector of the trust, meaning that John Mangoja is involved in this thing that they're doing. And Christian and Joseph had contacts with John Mangoja, which means that he was part of this thing, of this scheme of some sort, though he denies it. So he probably has financial benefit from it. So it is his thing. He's the one selling together with Tagwirei and Goba Matanga, because Goba Matanga is also named, Osiso Bimo is also named, His Excellency Emerson Mnangagwa is also named in the report. So these are the people that are allegedly the benefactors of this scheme. And it appears that Kutakwashe Tagwirei is a front for all of them. So the conflict of interest here is that the former Reserve Bank governor as one of those people to benefit from the financial windfall is also the CEO of the company buying these resources, even though I believe that these resources might be worth 300 or 400 or 500 million. John Mankushka, in not being prudent and clearly demonstrating this conflict of interest, instead of insisting that he can only buy these resources for 400 million or at most 500 million, if you really there's a strong enough reason or compelled to buy 500 million or 400 million to buy this. But no, he goes for 1.6 billion. What kind of a manager is that? You are managing an investment fund. You're supposed to be prudent. Haven't you read The Intelligent Investor? There is nothing intelligent here. We cannot buy something that is valued at 400 million and buy it for 1.6 billion. That is a crime of Mangoja. Even if he denies being involved in these FMP resources and Tagwirei's things, if he denies that, it's fair enough. We don't have enough evidence except for the email sent to Tagwirei through Ronelle Sinclair. We have got this evidence that we have excessively overpaid for an asset which I can value at 300 to 400 million. At most 500 if you want to be if you want to sweeten the deal. But 1.6 billion. Tell me the reason why we must keep you as CEO of Mutapa Investment Fund. Because clearly, I'm a shareholder of Mutapa Investment Fund. Because Mutapa Investment Fund is 100% owned by the Republic of Zimbabwe. And the Republic of Zimbabwe is owned by all 16 million Zimbabweans, including me. I am a shareholder of the Mutapa Investment Fund. So I'm asking my question, why should I keep the chairperson, John Mankuja, when he is clearly not acting in the best interest of the shareholders? If he was acting on behalf of the shareholders, he would have bought that thing for 400 to 500 million. But clearly buying it at 1.6 billion means that he is acting on the interest of the other stakeholders, which is the sellers. And the sellers are Tagwirei. And by the way, he is implicated as being one of the people who are going to benefit from 1.6, though there's no evidence of that yet. But this transaction is enough evidence to prove that perhaps there is something that Ronelle Sinclair was on when she put John Mankuja's name in that proposal to make him the protector of the Lighthouse Trust. Otherwise, if John Mankuja says it's all a lie, he was never involved, he knows nothing about it, why then does he go and rewards these people these excessive amounts, give them $1.6 billion? There is the criminality then. That's what you must be prosecuting. Because now, if I'm going to take 1 point, let us just be generous and say, Kuvimba Mining House, we can buy it for 500 million. You can value it at 500 million. 1.6 minus 500 million. I'm talking about the 35%. Because remember, again, another thing that you must remember, that something which is not made clear here is that the resources that are owned by Kuvimba Mining House are actually Sotic International resources. And they were bought by Tagwirei's man. The 65% that Almas Global Opportunity Fund owned on Sotic does not necessarily represent 65% of shareholder capital contributed by Almas Global Fund to Sotic International. Neither does it mean that the Lighthouse Trust contributed 35% of shareholder capital. No. The 35% and 65% were arbitrary figures that came out of the heads of Shan Kindamol and Kutakwashi Tagwirei, so that they could have a structure of bringing back Kutakwashi into Sotic International. So it doesn't mean that the 8.24 million that Sotic received from Almas Global Opportunity Fund represents 65% of total capitalization of the company. No, it's actually much, much less. And by the way, the guys from the Lighthouse Trust never contributed anything anyway. They were just fronts. So if you want to look at market capitalization of this Kubimba mining house or Sotic International, you don't have to look at the 65 versus 35%. You just have to look at the amount of money that Tagwirei brought into Sotic International to buy all those resources that made up Ziwa resources. So for me, that is my understanding that if you were to evaluate all of those, the value of those companies, to me, they are they are less than $1 billion. All right. If they're less than $1 billion, then 35% of that $1 billion should be around 300 to 400 million. If you're gonna buy 35% of the whole Kovimba mining house, okay, it should be 35%. Should be 300 to 400. If a generous 500 million. That remember, there is no real figures here. Remember, all these are based on guesstimates. And in these guesstimates, we try also to be liberal. We try to open the net wider. That's why I'm talking about 300, 400, 500 million. It could be anywhere in there that for the 35%. But for the whole valuation of Gobimba Mining House, because I remember I told you that the biggest one there is a Great Tax Investments, which is 680 million, 100% of it. But Tagwirei bought 50% of it. He didn't buy 100% of it. He bought 50% of it. So in Ziwa Resources doesn't own 100% of Great Tax. It owns 50%. So if we're gonna use that figure of 50%, you see already that we're around 300 and something million for Ziwa Resources, for Great Dykes. So the other mines, we do not know their valuations, but we know that they are not bigger than Great Dykes. We know that their value is in the hundreds. So I'm saying that to be fair and say, okay, we're going to buy these assets, at most 500 million could have been a generous offer. But this 1.6 begins to show us that this whole transaction or this whole arrangement of Kutakwash of consolidating the Zimbabwe mining industry is not about investing in individual mines, and improving operational management, pumping in money and fixing some of them, because some of them like the Zim alloys is not functioning well. The Everton gold mine, they had a shaft accident there. You would think that Tagwirei would come in, fix that problem with the accident, bring in new machinery. Most of these mines have got old machines and they are really underperforming. You think that there will be new machinery, new investment, they will pump in some money and turn these mines into profitable investments and make money out of them. It appears to me that that's not the investment plan here of Tagwirei. Tagwirei has got no intention of making these companies profitable. It's got one intention of spinning unprofitable, distressed mining firms, selling them to one gullible buyer, which is the government of Zimbabwe through Mutapa Investment Fund, because they've got their guy in there. Their guy is former Reserve Bank Governor John Mangochi, who is willing to overpay for these assets, thereby robbing Zimbabweans of at least 1.1 billion, 1.1 to 1.2 billion dollars, overpaying to the benefactors of these Fimbi resources, which is Kutakwashe Tagwirei Trust and Eagles Trust. Who knows if John Mangochi is part of the Eagles Trust? Who knows if SB Moyo and Guba Matanka and His Excellency are part of the Eagles Trust? Who knows? Because we do not know who's the part of the Eagles Trust. But these names have been cited by the report from the Sentry. And one of the names that is cited is the one that is actually paying the 1.6 billion to his friends, as it appears. So this is a classic case of corruption here in Zimbabwe. And this is just one. This is just uh, one transaction. We do not know about other transactions. The government says that the reason why they are buying 35% of MP resources is so that there shall be no more speculations on who owns the Kovimba mining house. What a convenient excuse. Who cares if there's questions? Just answer the question. Tell us who owns what, instead of saying I'm going to buy so that there will be no more speculation. And when you're buying at a highly inflated price, which is very suspicious. And ask yourself a question: how much did the government pay for the 65% that was previously owned by the Almas Global Opportunity Fund? And how much did Almas Global Opportunity Fund say it received from the Zimbabwean government? Because as far as we're concerned here, they only received 8.5 million from Tagwirei via Afro-Asia Bank. So who is Tagwirei working for? How did they come to 65% with these Ziwa resources? Because I can tell that the amount of money paid for all the Ziwa resources is less than $1 billion. The valuation. But Kuta Kwasha Tagwirei himself paid somewhere around 300 million for all of these things. So if he paid 300 million for all of them, or for most of them, through Sotek International, let's just say perhaps Ziwa Resources bought a few other mines after Sotek had transferred resources to them. It still doesn't make $1 billion to me. It still doesn't make $1 billion to me. Somebody is lying to somebody here. Somebody is terribly lying to somebody. Now, let's talk about the financing of this 1.6 billion. It appears that Zimbabwe owes $18 billion. $18 billion that we owe. And it is this. In the past 1 year, we've borrowed $3 more billion. From 18 to $21 billion now is the value of the Zimbabwe national debt. The government decided that 1.9 billion is going to go to the Motapa Investment Fund to fix these mines, which is a noble idea. 900 million to the Reserve Bank. 1.9 billion was good so that they can buy machinery, modernize these mines, turn them into profitable enterprises. But guess what? John Mankoska, PhD, did with $1.9 billion. He took 1.6 billion of it and gave to Tagwirei and friends. And just left with 300 million for the rest of the mines that desperately need investment. Then it begins to show me that John Mankoska and the people who are running the scheme have got no interest whatsoever in reviving the mining industry. You don't get it. They don't want those mines to be profitable, or they can't turn around. I think it's also a matter of incompetence. They do not have the necessary competences, the temperance, and the patience to turn around those mines. They don't have the investment business acumen to turn those mineral underperforming mines around. So they are trusting on one thing: dodgy deals of buying these cheap, consolidating these cheap mines, underperforming mines, fail to revamp them, then go to the international community and borrow 3 billion under the pretext of investing in those failing mines. And then people give money and say, okay, let's put in 3 billion in this thing. Perhaps these mines are going to be profitable. No, they take that 1.9 billion allocated to the Motapa Investment Funds and spend 1.6 billion as a payout to Tagwirei. Nothing about recapitalizing the failing mines. Of course, we want to recapitalize the failing mines. I want them to be profitable. We want employment in the country. We want those ones to be profitable so that they can pay taxes into the country. And by the way, there's a lot of shenanigans here surrounding some of these, most of these mines owned by Tagwirei. They're given tax breaks, especially this one, this Great Dykes Investments. They were given a 5-year tax break. You know, they were able to import things duty free, and all of these. This government support, unnecessary government support, which really is a way, which functions as a way or a vehicle of siphoning government funds, because tax that is owed to the Zimbabwean government is exempted on these Tagwirei owned companies, which in fact is which equates a stealing of the tax of the Zimbabweans. There is no rationale for giving Great Tax Investments a 5-year tax holiday and all these other sweet incentives that make operations cheaper at the expense of the Zimbabwean fiscus. That right there, my friends, is the era of President Emerson Mnangagwa for allowing such things to happen. The people that are his friends, his companies, are benefiting at the expense of the public pace. We have got schools not built, roads not maintained. We've got councils that are struggling. Yet the money that we must be making from the resources, the government is putting a waiver and letting their friends just export our minerals without paying taxes. That is unfair. That is really unfair. We should not allow that to happen going forward. So it is imprudent for the Reserve Bank, former Reserve Bank governor, to pay 1.6 billion to Tagwirei instead of investing in the mining industry. Look at South African mining industry. Look at how well developed it is. Communities have been built surrounding high performing mines, towns, and there's an economic windfall downstream as you revitalize the mining industry. I'm just not talking about government revenue through taxation, but also employment opportunities and also downstream industries surrounding the people that work in those mines. It creates towns. Things like How Mine created towns. Kwekwe is a mining town. Chekut is a mining town. West Nicholson, Gwanda, those are mining towns. So if we revive the mining industry in Zimbabwe, you could have new towns surrounding that, and the economic activity will begin to increase. And also reining in on externalization of our funds, making sure that the resources of the minerals are invested within the country across the board. And this Mutapa Investment Fund has over 20 state-owned enterprises, including Govemba, which owns a dozen of gold, lithium, and nickel and platinum mines. So now, Govemba is just one of the 20 SOEs that Mutapa Investment Fund owns. Now, here's the thing. If they can pull out this scheme here with Govemba, what makes you think that they are not going to do the same with other SOEs? Buying stakes in those SOEs at highly inflated prices to their friends, and perhaps even selling those SOEs for cents on the dollar to their friends, only to come around later on and buy the same SOEs at a very high price. Because these resources that the government is acquiring from Fimpi Resources are the very same mines that were owned by the government before through this vehicle. Called the Zimbabwe Mining Development Corporation. Some of these mines Tagwirei bought from the government, from Zimbabwe Mining Development Corporation, owned by the government. So the government sold some of these mines to Tagwirei for cents on the dollar, for very, very cheap. And then the same government comes around now through Mutapa Investment Trust to buy the very same mining assets that they failed to and mismanaged for $1.6 billion. Do you think that is fair? That is your government for you. We're going to stop here for today. My name is Ngobani Zondo, and we are hoping that we can bring about change in Zimbabwe by highlighting the deficiencies in our governance structure, so that when we bring a new Zimbabwe, we are of the same understanding of what kind of policies we need to pursue and what kind of enemies the state has been exposed to. This is a classic example of state capture. We need to free the state of Zimbabwe from state capture by Tagwirei and his associates who are very powerful in the government. Have a great day.